Demon Slayer Infinity Castle is everything a Demon Slayer fan could ask for. Honestly, it feels like its own version of other sweeping spectacles like Hunter x Hunter's Palace Invasion or JJK's Shibuya Incident. You've got a veritable gang of characters we've grown with, thrust into this impossible situation, all struggling through their own challenges concurrently. Of course, it wouldn't be a shounen without new power-ups, and Tanjiro gets a pretty important one in the fight against Akaza. Desperately searching deep in his memory for any inkling of an advantage against Akaza's seemingly psychic ability to detect attacks, he stumbles upon a quiet conversation with his father. In it, he describes a transparent world, one reached through constant effort, eliminating every inefficiency until one simply exists as a being within the universe. Ultimately, it's this ability to enter the transparent world that gives Tanjiro the edge to turn an impossible fight. But what is the transparent world? Does it actually exist? I made a video basically fact-checking Demon Slayer's breathing techniques and found out that it indeed has, if not an ounce, at least a teaspoon of truth to it. But surely not the transparent world, right? A theoretical space where you can see muscle fibers moving, lungs expanding, and lack killing intent, whatever that means? Well, I have a couple of theories. First, let's tackle the name. Tanjiro calls it the transparent world, and as far as we can see, that's literal. Akaza's skin becomes translucent, Tanjiro going as far to observe the gentle expanding and contracting of lungs. But this doesn't quite make sense. Exactly how does remembering an old conversation trigger X-ray vision of all things? Well, first consider that a lot of visual elements in Demon Slayer are not literal. As Gotoge-sensei has mentioned, many of the Demon Slayer's stunning elemental forms are simply evocative of their feeling. Water Wheel doesn't literally summon a wheel of water, and Thunderclap and Flash contains no thunder nor flash. Knowing this, what are some other explanations that could have Tanjiro feeling as if he can see every little thing Akaza does transparently? Other than magic, which is probably the actual answer. The first thing that came to mind was Laplace's demon. Rather than some biblical reference, demons are common in scientific theory as convenient entities to demonstrate concepts. In Laplace's case, his demon knows the exact state and condition of all particles in the universe. By establishing this demon, Laplace is able to come to some interesting conclusions. Everything has a cause and effect. If a particle is at a certain position or moving at a certain speed, it must have gotten there somehow, some way. Laplace posits that this demon, who knows the current state of everything, would therefore be able to reverse engineer every single past state from the present one, and conversely every future state. Simply put, Laplace's demon knows history itself, what has been, and what will come to be. Am I saying Tanjiro is at the same level? Of course not. But transferring over similar concepts, the idea that his senses, honed through hundreds of battles, have enabled him to sort of pierce the veil, as it were, I think that's within the realm of possibility. Intuition is a powerful thing. Let's look at how Tanjiro arrives at the transparent world, because he goes through sort of an iterative process. It really all starts because he notices that Akaza's attacks are so precise, they're almost magnetized to vital areas. While desperately dodging an onslaught of attacks, Tanjiro delves deep in thought. During this frantic search, he remembers a peculiar phrase Akaza used in the fight against Rengoku, fighting spirit. And after pondering if it's similar to his acute sense of smell, he lands on a quiet moment with Inosuke. Inosuke explains that he can sense when someone's looking at him, particularly with an intent to harm. He tells a quick joke, wishing he could remove his killing intent and get close to enemies without them noticing. Tanjiro remarks that it was kind of a childish conversation, but that it might also contain an important key. We obviously know Tanjiro is on the right path here given the outcome. But even disregarding where he ends up, there's already a grain of truth here. Anecdotally, I'm sure you've had a situation where you felt generally uneasy, only to find someone was staring at you, as if boring a hole through you. Turns out there's something called the psychic staring effect, or Scopaesthesia. The science is a bit mixed here, but we know that the brain has special gaze detection cells that light up when someone is staring directly at us, but not when their gaze is averted merely a few degrees. Humans in general are experts in non-verbal communication. Our bodies belie our intentions far more than our conscious actions. Now imagine being in a life or death situation. where your senses are heightened to their breaking point, where every blow is potentially a lethal one. Just how much does stress help in a fight? I think the next place to look when determining Tanjiro's new ability is in the fight or flight response. Also known as the acute stress response, this is what kicks in during life or death, do or die moments. You might have heard reports of mothers obtaining massive increases in strength, allowing them to lift cars off of their trapped children. But how does this work? Upon encountering a stressor, your sympathetic nervous system kicks into action, flooding your body with hormones like adrenocorticotropic hormone and corticotrophin-releasing hormone. These sound like fancy names, but the end result is the release of something I'm sure we're all familiar with: adrenaline. Contrary to popular belief, adrenaline is not a miracle drug. It won't give you extra strength or super speed. But if anything, I think that makes those Supermom reports all that more impactful. Turns out, they had the strength within them all along. Adrenaline, combined with that primal desperation to protect your young, gives them the ability to reach their physical limit without worrying about the aftermath. For Tanjiro, his pupils would dilate, allowing in the necessary light to detect Akaza's incoming blows just a little quicker. Blood flow is shunted to the muscles, providing the energy needed to quickly pivot away from an attack, or make a strike that much stronger. The body's blood clotting ability strengthens to stem the tide. His liver would start breaking down glucose, extra energy for both his muscles and his brain. The heart races, increasing vital oxygen delivery to starving muscles. And most importantly for a Demon Slayer, your breathing becomes enhanced, quickening in pace while small airways in the lungs open wide, allowing you to take in as much oxygen as possible with every breath. At the end of the day, what this means is that Tanjiro is more perceptive. Is it that he can literally see Akaza's lungs? Or is it that he has gained the capability to more easily notice his chest rising and falling, the muscles tensing under the skin, his ribs expanding? The cause and effect that allows him to infer Akaza's movements and predict what comes next? Tanjiro sort of becomes Laplace's demon, if just for a moment. You might say, sure, but literally everyone experiences the fight or flight response. Why aren't the newbies also obtaining this new power? What makes Tanjiro so special? Again, I think it goes back to that conversation with his father. Adrenaline and the acute stress response are remarkable assets in a fight, but only if you know how to use them. I think we've all experienced that sort of shaky unease when forced into uncomfortable situations, like public speaking or confrontation. It's hard to imagine pulling off stunning acrobatics when your muscles are so tense they're shaking. But Tanjiro's dad goes over what might be the simplest yet most important concept when it comes to Tanjiro's transformation: muscle memory. In that conversation, Tanjiro's father describes the traditional ritual he performs that eventually becomes the basis for Tanjiro's sun breathing, or Hinokami Kagura. Although the actual forms are formidable moves by themselves, at the end of the day, they're just moves. What I think is far more valuable is his dad's explanation of how those moves were refined. He describes constant repetition, repeating them over and over, each cycle eliminating some small inefficiency until every movement is purposeful and without waste. We've all heard of the concept of muscle memory. Bruce Lee once said, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. This fear is borne out in the research. While the specific 10,000 hours to become an expert adage has its caveats, it is generally true that mastery requires high volumes of practice. Not mindless practice, have you, but thoughtful, disciplined repetition. With each action, you're developing neural pathways that over time consolidates learning. Movements become more automatic and less cognitively demanding. The more you do something, the less you have to think about it." Infinity Castle happens at the apex of a long journey for Tanjiro. He started off barely able to conquer Urokodaki's mountain, but we have seen him grow immensely from that clumsy kid who just headbutt everything. Hell, one of the seasons was literally called the Hashira training arc. I think it's reasonable to assume that at this point, Tanjiro's body, and more importantly his neurons, have been honed by both deliberate practice and the harsh, fast-paced teacher of live combat. Ironically enough, I think Tanjiro's realization of the transparent world is partially him realizing that he needs to calm down. Stop overthinking so much and let your muscle memory take over. Don't think about how you need to find an opening or slice in a specific way. Just act and react. Okay, we can concede that maybe Tanjiro has increased physical ability due to the transparent world. But the lack of killing intent or fighting spirit has to be a bunch of baloney, right? It's gotta just be like magic, like ki or ryatsu or something. And that I don't disagree. I don't know of any research claiming we can go kaioken or something. But I do think there's a possible explanation for removing your killing intent, while still, well, intending to kill. Psychologists have discovered a mental state some people enter when placed in challenging but doable situations. They call it flow. It's a precarious position that exists just on the border of your limits. But once you're there, you unlock immense performance. Athletes describe it as being in the zone or locked in. Oftentimes, action and awareness merge. There is no longer a self performing the task. One is the task. That last part is what I want to hone in on. After all, how can there be any killing intent or fighting spirit when there is no self to emanate those from? I think the idea that Tanjiro enters some transparent world isn't entirely accurate. More so, he becomes transparent himself. Rather than separate beings with goals and intentions, Tanjiro is simply a collection of molecules swimming amongst other molecules. Instead of trying to cut Akaza's head off, his neck is simply in the way of a familiar form Tanjiro has practiced 1,000 times. I don't want to make it seem like this is some magical thing that only exists for demon slayers and top athletes. You've most likely experienced your own state of flow and loss of self. For example, I, like many others, have been absolutely obsessed with Silksong. It's a gorgeous game with a great soundtrack. And it's hard. In my opinion, considerably harder than Hollow Knight. I don't really consider myself a good player. I'm currently at almost 100 hours when How Long to Beat lists average completion time at around 66. But when I encounter a hard boss, for a time, I channel Tanjiro and engage in deliberate practice. After all, you're doing the same thing over and over, making the same run, dying in the same phases. However, slowly but surely, you notice small improvements. The run gets easier and easier to the point where impossible platforming becomes second nature. Phase 2, or even 3, at first a grueling grind, become automatic. Finally, after tens or even hundreds of tries, you get that one magical run where everything just seems to click. Your reflexes seem better than ever, and you know the attacks well enough to the point where it seems like you can predict the future. Time blurs until you're greeted with that blessed slowdown signifying victory. Often, my roommate will try to give advice. I could see you panicking, or when he does this, you try to do this, but fail. And I have to tell him, I'm not trying to do anything. There's nothing going on in my head. My fingers just move. Demon Slayer Infinity Castle is pure Demon Slayer, with all the pros and cons that summons. It means flashy animation and gorgeous set pieces, but also extremely long extended tragic backstories for its big bads. But even as someone who cursed the movie with a full bladder as we seemingly relived Akaza's past life in real time, I want to give it some grace. Of course every demon has a tragic backstory. How do you think demons become demons? In a world that is increasingly trying to be more black and white, I appreciate Kimetsu no Yaiba for trying to introduce some gray. People are at the end of the day partially products of their environments, and the traumas out of their control that are part and parcel of daily life. There's a moment in Akaza's past that really captures this. After he gets introduced to Koyuki and begins taking care of her, he gets mildly annoyed at her constant atonement. He quips, "Why do the sick always have to cry and apologize?" What a sight then, to see him, crying and apologizing in her arms. But I also appreciate Demon Slayer for not going too crazy with the power-ups. There's nothing wrong with a grand transformation that plays with the fabric of reality itself. But as Demon Slayer shows, There's also nothing wrong with simplicity, grounded in reality but nonetheless a remarkable advantage. Something just strong enough to turn the tide of the fight. More than that, while I can't activate Sharingan or tap into my Santa ancestry, what I can do is practice deliberate repetition, harness the acute stress response, and try to maintain enough concentration to enter flow. Just like how Demon Slayer explored just how important breathing was as a tool to be harnessed, I'm grateful for its many lessons to benefit my life. Thanks Gotoge-sensei, and thank you Tanjiro. It's been a ride. Thanks for watching! I'm not a source reader, so this video might be more full of stutters than normal, if you catch my drift. But rather than trying to give a comprehensive explainer of the transparent world itself, it's more of a thought experiment of how much we can connect typical shonen shenanigans to the real world. And I'm happy in that regard. If you liked the video, please click the like button and subscribe for more content. If you want to support me further, you can donate to my Patreon. Special thanks to Gilliam, KK74, Lolcats, Joseph, Lakatu, ADMG, Panda Tenders, Dr. Dre Rosen, Eugenio the Brony, Shaw Queen 807, Annie Stuck, Matt Whimsical, 51510N, Tremor Gamers 632, Iranativ, and Infinite Beaks for their support. And of course, if anything I said was wrong, I'm sorry. I must have stuttered.